I think we're ready.
Sorry.
Is Tristan not going to be able to make it?
Tristan's not able to make it.
All right, so everybody's good to go? All right, so 6:03, we'll go ahead and call this meeting to order. Just a couple of comments. Just 1 week from now, we will be celebrating and commemorating the life of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And I would be remiss if I didn't share any comments or reflections at this time, particularly given the work that this commission does. And one of the themes that I keep coming back to in this moment is that service without systemic change, or service without intention towards systemic change, is really not the most effective way that I believe Dr. King's legacy should be remembered. And I think, as we continue to do our work, and perhaps, in future years, we'll be able to officially commemorate in a way that is both impactful for us in the community of Carlisle, but also for his legacy as well. So I just wanted to share those thoughts with you this morning, and then also, or this evening, and then also I am going to ask to be excused at 7:10 this evening to attend another meeting. Thanks.
Thank you, Tawanda. I think we'll try to wrap up by then anyway, so you shouldn't miss too much. The next item on our agenda is the approval of minutes, and there are actually two sets because I neglected to successfully share the November minutes for our last meeting. So they were in our meeting packet. Hopefully everyone's had time to review them. At this time, I'll open the floor for any amendments. If there are no proposed amendments, I would entertain a motion to approve both sets of minutes.
I so move.
Okay, Member Donaldson moved. Is there a second?
Second.
Lou seconds. Werderbach. Did I pronounce that correctly? Member Werderbach.
Yes. Very good. Thank
Excellent. Okay, great. Our minutes are approved. On to discussion items. So
They were just seconded. We didn't vote.
Oh, goodness. Thank you. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay. Now we can move on. Thank you, Raph. We are on to our discussion items, the usual suspects. We have a report out from the research working group, and then we'll have a report out from the community engagement working group. And our report out is very short. We did not meet over the holiday season. And so we thought we might use this time together to set a meeting schedule for 2022 and engage in a little bit of goal setting. Part of the reason for that is that in my new job, I have my weeks look different every week, and it's a lot easier if I have a standing meeting on my calendar to schedule around it than to shuffle every month and figure out when we're going to meet. So I was wondering if we could decide on something like perhaps the fourth Monday of every month or something like that. Any thoughts?
This is specifically for the research working group?
Correct.
Since Tristan is a member, should we not wait until she can confirm her availability?
We could wait and settle that by email. As a preliminary, do we want to identify a couple of slots and ask if that would work for her? Or would that be a waste of our time together?
I hasten to wait on pretty much anything. So I think if we can get some dates down. Tristan's also a member of the community engagement group. So she's involved in, working groups, even if she can't make all of the research working group meetings.
I kind of like the idea of the week before the commission meets. Actually, no, that's not what I like. We need to develop a cadence such that we have enough time to do some work and have something to report by the time the commission meeting rolls around. So should we shoot for something like, if we meet the second Monday of the month, sometime in the fourth week of the month? Or the third week of the month? Should it be immediately following our meeting because we have some energy coming out of the full commission meeting and can get right to work? Or is that too congested for folks to have a commission meeting followed by a work group meeting 2 weeks in 2 weeks straight?
For myself, I'm fairly flexible, so I will roll with whatever the group decides.
Okay.
I'm fairly flexible as well. There's just certain Mondays that I at least tentatively should be out of town, but with the events of the past 2 years, I don't really know for sure. But I'm fairly flexible, especially if we're talking about Monday nights still.
Okay. Okay, so it sounds like we will settle those items by email. With that, I will turn things over to the Community Engagement Working Group.
Awesome, thanks, Emily. You guys mind if I start and then to Wanda Dora?
That's great.
To jump in. So, had a good meeting this past week, and I'm just going to hit a couple highlights from the notes that I took. We finally got time to debrief from our first Thinking About Race Thursday, and I think the consensus was, for the first time, we were very happy with it. I think for the first go around, I mean, we obviously want to see improvements in the future, but didn't really have a ton of expectations going in. A couple of things that we said didn't go well / might change. The small room was a bit awkward. We'd really like to accelerate the search for other venues that we may be able to host this. We had a couple cool ideas. So just floated in the brainstorm in our last meeting. I think it was Tristan who had suggested, can we put prompt questions in the announcement or the press release? Get people thinking ahead of time about what those questions may be, so we like the idea that we had prompt questions, but what if we threw those out there in advance and people were able to sleep on them for a little bit, think about them, and maybe bring some answers to the meeting. The other thing we did was just list some organizations that are doing race-based work to whom we could reach out. So I think the catalyst for this conversation was potential host places, but at the same time, any kind of partnership could be beneficial. So in no particular order, we listed the YWCA, Bridge Builders, Dickinson College, Carlisle School District Teachers Union, Hope Station, the Carlisle Arts Learning Center, CALP, Chamber of Commerce, Employment Skills Center, and a few individuals as well. So nothing definitive there. That was just a group brainstorm, but us thinking about, okay, if we are to extend it, maybe if we think we may not get the invitation per se to be somewhere, could we reach out and see who might be interested to host? The only other note, and then I'll turn it over if you have anything to add. We just said for our next working group, we want to discuss February meeting timing and prompt questions, with the understanding that we are not going to host a January meeting. We tossed that idea around. Do we do like a town hall, a 1-year anniversary of the racial justice town hall? And I think we said with other events in tandem with MLK Day that we would defer on that. So that would be our plan, and then to look into February as a next Thinking About Race Thursday, and hopefully have a venue and some prompt questions ahead of time for that. And this is in OneDrive as well, the notes that I took from the meeting, if you want to reference anything else.
May I ask, Raz, so there are the notes from your meeting. But I want to make sure there's a feedback loop established between the Thinking About Race Thursdays and what the research group is doing, because it's possible that suggestions will come up in that context for interventions that we might consider implementing here in the borough. And the research group can kind of take those suggestions and look into are those things that other communities are doing? Is there a template we might follow? Is it something that might end up in our final recommendations? So, are you all keeping a record of what folks share at those events, or do you feel that would disrupt the feeling that it's a safe space to share? Certainly, we do need to let them know that what they share will be passed on if that is what we decide to do.
That's a really good point. So in the other folder on our OneDrive, I do have notes that I took, like pretty extensive notes from the first meeting, maybe overkill even. But it's so if you look at the folders, the community engagement one. I will let you know offline where it is, but I definitely have a list of notes from that we could that'd be happy to share.
I do want to say I think it's important, however, for us to assure people that if they don't want to share their name, then that's okay. Like it's still a safe place and space for them. So we'll just write down details instead of maybe their names.
I think maybe what might be helpful is I like what Doreen said about them being, a safe space and not wanting to give their name. And then I wonder if there's a way that we can at least have a way to follow back up with people if there is some information shared that the research group might want to dive a little deeper and see if the person who shared is open to that.
We won't use their name in anything like a final report. I just don't want folks to disclose stories that when they're not aware that there is this feedback loop. But I can't imagine a scenario where we would say Citizen John Jones reported that. It would just be the actionable item that emerged from the share that would appear in that final report. Nevertheless, I think folks should be aware that that is something that we're doing.
Yes.
So they do. Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, sorry. Yes, I would agree with that. And as most of you know, any kind of research work that would involve human subjects would automatically have some things we would make clear to them on how the data was being used and the like. I think we're all tracking with that. The idea would be to make sure that we communicate that clearly, so there's no misunderstanding, of course.
Right. And then folks also have the agency, right, to share that story in a research capacity. So they're sharing it in a community engagement and sharing space, general information gathering. If they would choose to engage deeper and further in a research trajectory, then I think folks have the agency to be able to do that as well.
Sure. As Emily said, though, I mean, you might think differently, but I can't think of a scenario wherein we would have to ever use a person's name. But you'd want to be mindful that even certain descriptive data might suggest who the person is. So we would just have to be very careful with whatever we might use.
For those who were present at the first Thinking About Race Thursday, did we set that disclaimer before the meeting? Do you happen to remember?
Yes, we did. We didn't do it in my view. I mean, we didn't do it like we would normally do it, like if you were doing, a big research study or anything. But from my perspective, it should have been clear based on what was said.
So thank you, Lou. I apologize. Just one other note. So in OneDrive, I realized I had this saved in my personal file, so I'll move it to the Truth and Reconciliation. And if anyone has trouble with access, I've been trying to keep emails still, like maintaining everyone's personal as well, just as a courtesy copy. But if you're having trouble with access, just let me know.
Thanks, Raz.
Can I ask something? I just want to make sure I'm clear. When we were talking about the hosting venues, in the thinking, was it that, for example, I'm just throwing this out there, the YMCA, for example, was the thinking that the YMCA would assist in the messaging in terms of announcing the event? If we're talking about people that regularly go to the YMCA, for example, they may be more willing or more apt to participate because it's in the venue that they're familiar with. Not to say it's exclusively for them, of course, but we might get raised participation levels by allowing those that host to also participate in some sort of messaging, which are more apt, to reach the people that they normally speak with. Was that sort of the thinking as well, or was it just the idea of having a space that wasn't too small?
I think it's both and, Lou. I think, depending on the organization and where their level of engagement is with the subject matter, that, they may want to sort of partner with us in, gathering some folks around the table, or it may just be, the idea of space. That's, another way. So I am excited about doing that. And I like the bridge builders concept, because I like the fact that we could, if there was a Black church and a white church that wanted to kind of come together on this, then they could take turns, alternate it back and forth, and really make it some dope programming. So, yeah.
Okay, thanks.
And then Raz, did you have other things to share under community engagement?
I didn't have anything else.
Okay. So I'll just kind of pick up where Raz left off, and talk about number 2 is our digital presence. The thought was that that a more digital presence was needed beyond what we have on the borough website. And it doesn't look like that's necessarily something that we would want to do. Emily, I don't know if you wanted to speak to that a little bit more.
Tawanda and I were both approached by a couple of community members who shared that they felt that the TRC was a bit invisible in terms of our digital presence, and were wondering if we would do something like maintain a presence on social media, or build a website or something like that. And I ran away when those questions started to be proposed, because I am not good at maintaining a social media presence. But I told those who brought the concern that I would bring it to the commission for consideration, because it is going to take some person power and some resources to develop a more prominent digital presence. So I said we would entertain the question, and I present it to you with my concern that we don't have the person power to maintain it, but perhaps somebody would love to do that. So let's discuss it.
Emily, too, and I think beyond that, I think about mission drift a little bit, and the things that we need to do, and how does a digital presence help us to do that, and how does it take away resources from us doing that? So I'm looking at it through those lenses myself, personally.
It might help, because in some ways social media platforms are more egalitarian.
Yeah, I would agree. Knowing a little about cyber and social media. They are very much egalitarian. One of the challenges, though, I've been giving this some thought myself on some related issues, is that frankly, there are so many platforms now. I mean, I live on Facebook, Twitter, and a few other more exclusive platforms, and frankly, it keeps me hopping. So I don't, I don't want to give anyone the impression that I'm blowing them off. So if they're sending me something, I try to respond or is try to keep up with what's happening. I don't have a sense for the borough if there's how much of a digital presence we would need in order to make an impact. How many folks are on Facebook that we're trying to reach? How many folks regularly visit Twitter or even the Sentinel? I'm a subscriber to that. They have a remarks section for the various articles and the like, and I don't really see a whole lot of participation there. So I wonder, where's our community? Where is the Carlisle Borough community on social media? Is there a spot? Is there a preferred platform? Or would we be really expending limited resources on something that's just probably too big for us to handle? On the other hand, a limited presence might be better than not much at all.
Do you mind if I jump in real quick, since this is
Sure.
if you are to have, I will say this from experience, a Facebook presence, you do need to post on a very regular basis or you lose people very fast. And it's changing. Like, the algorithm now has changed so much that even our normal stuff that would get good engagement just isn't anymore. And and there's no rhyme or reason to why Facebook does it that way, but you do need someone regularly posting. So just to give you that sense of
Yep, I completely concur with that. Their algorithm, they've recently changed their algorithms, and you're right. If you don't engage routinely, you begin to lose exposure and visibility. There's just so much out there now.
Can I bring something that's maybe tangential to this, but maybe not, and just think worth airing out? It is perhaps a case study for us could be the inbox to the TRC email. Because I've been looking through it. I mean, there's not a ton in there, in fairness, but one of my questions has been who among us can or should answer that? Like, is that on a whatever basis we're able to? And could that be an indicator of how we might be aligned to service something like a Facebook account? Because I guess my concern is I don't know that we're getting back to the people who have reached out to us, unless Mayor Schultz, you may.
I've been sure to respond and make sure, because I know you all didn't have or may not yet have your borough emails set up, but I've been sure that we've responded to everybody who's written to us so far.
Thank you. And I guess maybe with that in mind, is that how we want to maintain this going forward?
Well, we're doing this work at a particularly difficult time in terms of modes of communication, because we're trying to reach a wide swath of people across a lot of different demographic categories, including age. And we talk about email and we talk about Facebook, and there are some people who have kind of aged out of both of those modes of communication. So younger people who might want to share their stories aren't using either of those things to talk to one another. So it's almost like if we're going to think about this, we need to invest some effort on the front end, thinking about what venues and platforms would really generate the most valuable participation, because what we don't want is poorly maintained accounts across the board. So I think we should think a lot on the front end before we say, yes, let's move ahead with some more digital presence.
Could I jump in for a second? I've just started texting somebody who works for a social media management company, and can't attribute who it is at this point, but I can run something like this by them, talk about what level of engagement and management you might need, and whether they might do it for free. or at a very insignificant cost. So if that's a direction that the commission wants to go, I know these folks really, really well, and would be happy to have that conversation.
I have a question that's kind of returning to something that Wanda said at the beginning, and I guess I'm wondering what exactly we think we're going to use this for. So we have a means by which people can get in touch. We have multiple means by which people can get in touch with us. They could come to our meetings that are held. They can email us, and now we have a monthly forum where people can meet with us as well. And I'm just wondering, do we actually need many more forums for people to share their stories, especially because there are so many other ways to gather information about people and the problems that we have? So I'm just curious about like what we actually hope that this will accomplish.
One of the people who brought this concern forward noted that it's not obvious to many in the community how to get in touch with us and when and where our meetings are, because they're not reading the Sentinel and they're not going to the borough website. So is there a more dynamic mode of communication where we can be pushing out our meeting times and that Thinking About Race Thursday is happening? So there was a front end concern that these other modes of getting in touch with us aren't getting pushed out aggressively enough to the community. And then there's the concern that not everybody feels comfortable sharing what they have to say in this kind of venue, but they might in something like a subreddit type format where we can post a topic and then people can anonymously share some things. But of course, there are concerns about collecting information that way. We have no way of verifying that it's a Carlisle resident who is posting on a venue like that. Although I guess, I'm not a tech whiz. Obviously, I ran screaming from this conversation. So maybe there is a way to better track that. But those are the two concerns that were brought to me.
A couple of things. Interestingly enough, on Sunday, someone else said to me, how do I find the TRC on the website? And I was out and about at that time, so I couldn't necessarily come in. I mean, it's pretty easy, but number one, what if we just had a few flyers for businesses? And just, most businesses have the bulletin board or something like that. So what if we just added a few flyers in businesses that would continue to share information about when we meet, etc. That's number one. Second, what if we had a thought exchange? I know, my place of employment, we've had thought exchanges. And again, I don't know how that works in terms of keeping people anonymous. It is done anonymously, but it is such a great opportunity for people who are comfortable with the computer to share their thoughts. And then what happens, I don't know if everyone has done a thought exchange. So basically what happens with the thought exchange is that, the host will say, hey, this is what we are working on. We would like to hear suggestions. I mean, we could add a prompt, whatever the case may be. You set a time limit for that, let's say a week. As people post, then other users can go back and respond or just, add like a 1 for, I strongly disagree, a 5 for strongly agree. And so it kind of just builds. And so by the end of the week, you have the opportunity to read not only various thoughts and ideas and suggestions and stories from people, but you also get a chance to see other people's responses. And it's It's really, really interesting. And so, again, my place of employment has done it several times, and it has produced really, really great discussions.
What platform is it on?
Okay, now you're asking a little bit too much.
I love this idea. It's just, maybe that's what we need to add is
Yeah.
some interactive component that could even be contained on the borough's website.
Yeah,
Where,
I could easily reach out to, my bosses and get some information.
So I just have another thought. I'm looking at the community engagement for the Carlisle Climate Action Plan. They have a Facebook page. And they have 280 people or so like it or follow it. And that to me is kind of cool because we're getting the information in front of that many people. One of my gripes early on has been that it's so hard to find our stuff on the borough website. Like it's just really difficult. So the more I think about it, I'm wondering if we may want to proceed down the Facebook page route and maybe what Doreen is talking about also. Stephanie, if I can ask, who manages this page for climate action?
It hasn't been updated to my knowledge since August, so I don't know if because their community engagement lead resigned. So I'm assuming it passed over, hopefully, to the new lead, Mitch. But I have not seen them update it since August.
And they manage this entirely themselves?
Yes.
And then do you share from here to the borough page sometimes?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I'm sending a link for the thought exchange to everyone as soon as my computer cooperates.
I think I'm ready to take action on the flyer idea. That strikes me as something that is low investment, potentially high yield. We do that once. We may catch some people who wouldn't otherwise be looking for us to find us on the website. You have to decide, I'm going to go to the borough website and try to find these people. But if you're going to get your hair cut or to buy a drink or something like that, you're maybe not looking for us, and our flyer might catch your eye, and you might take down the email address and send us something. So I'll make a motion that we make a flyer to post in local businesses and churches, etc.
Before we move on the flyer idea, I did want to share also that we have a trifold brochure that I used at the Colorized performance. So we have that, and I'm wondering if it might just be easier for us to adapt that into a flyer.
Absolutely. I can bake into the motion that whoever has that content can take it and render it into a flyer. Boom.
I'll second that.
Okay. All in favor of the flyer posting?
Aye.
Aye.
That's not exactly digital, folks. The concern was our digital presence. Our answer is we're making a paper flyer to hang in businesses. So we'll at least do that. Where are we on another mode of presence that is digital? Do we want to maybe next meeting revisit the platform that Doreen is suggesting?
It could. Could I suggest maybe that community engagement take both the thought, I just had it, the thought thing, the thought exchange and the Facebook option, and can community engagement work through both of those, and how we might use them and how they might benefit us in the work that we're trying to do?
I can't speak for everyone on the research group, but I suspect that we're all delighted that you're taking that on. So yes, that'd be great if the community engagement work would take that up.
Just wait till you see what we shove over to you after we talk about it.
don't you dare. As for the flyers, I think probably ASAP is a good idea because the new year has me thinking about our deadline. We need to start having more information come in and be processed out into this final report. So I'm feeling the pressure as I look at 2022 on all the documents I'm looking at. Anything else with digital presence?
I don't believe so. So I'll just kind of clean it up here with future events. So then our next Thinking About Race Thursday is on Thursday, February 10th. I did share the colorized performance. That email went out about that. So I was able to attend that and share our brochure with a few folks. So that was a great opportunity for us to be able to do that. And I'm looking for some additional opportunities similar to that in the future. And I think that might be all that I had to say on that.
You said February 10th?
For the next Thinking About Race, yes.
And I'm good there. Can I just ask one other question in the digital presence realm? Just circling back to the email address, do we want any kind of standard protocol for emails coming in as to who would respond or?
Raz, would you like to be nominated to be the email responder? You're already keeping an eye and doing a really great job.
That's kind of what I was going for.
I would be delighted if you would take on that role. I think we all trust you and think that you would do great. So I nominate Raz to be the official email responder.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Congratulations and thank you.
Thanks.
Anything else from the community engagement group? Any new business from any members?
Just one suggestion for future meetings as far as our agenda is set up. Do we want to keep something on the agenda that either provides updates from council or a way for us to follow up on some things we've either kicked to them or waiting to hear back from either council or from the borough manager's office? So like I'm thinking about, and certainly not prepared for one tonight, but like an update on where we are with the seal and the crest and some additional things that could be needed from us in that way, or any other things that we've kicked over to them. And then maybe as part of that too, getting to learn more about the 32,000 and how that can be spent and where and how all of that happens. So I'm suggesting adding a D to our agenda where we're able to get that information in a more structured fashion.
We could call it something like borough collaboration or communication or something like that. Yeah, I have no objection to that. Sounds good to me. Yeah, sounds like we have consensus on that.
Great, I'll take that up with the person that designs our agendas.
All right. Yes, please.
Yeah. So I was just in keeping with the idea that the deadline is ticking. We talked last year about having potential speakers, and one of the things that was that happened is both the research committee and the community engagement committee kind of both thought we'd think about that topic. And sometimes what happens when you assign things to two people is neither party actually ends up doing it. So I was wondering if one committee should just take this on so that we can actually begin scheduling people, since well, time again is ticking. I think it makes sense for the research group to just go ahead and maybe choose some folks and maybe present them for the whole group to vote on maybe for the next meeting.
I certainly support that.
Help me again, please. The idea behind the speakers was to inform whom? Us, the community. What was the thinking there? Just again.
Yeah, so I apologize. It was discussed much earlier. The idea of the speakers is that we could have people who could inform us about us being the community at large about issues related to truth and reconciliation. Either in a more global sense, we could think about people who have served on similar kinds of commissions in other places and can talk about their experience. So one person I had in mind was a person who's a truth and reconciliation expert who's done research on truth and reconciliation committees around the world and has written recently about how such committees might function in America. But there are tons of other types of people that we might have that could engage our more general community. And maybe we could also kind of more privately dialogue with them about strategization, if that makes sense, depending on who the speakers are.
Yes, thank you for refreshing my memory on that. I think you had mentioned that before. It just wasn't foremost in my mind. As you know, like you said, TRCs are global. There are also several TRCs that have been stood up here in the United States. Those are a lot closer, just from my cursory examination, a lot closer to what we're seeking in terms of getting actionable work done for the borough. But you're quite right. TRCs are not new, and there are a plethora of speakers that could probably assist. I would suggest it would be important that they understood what we were trying to do here, and that they would tailor their information or insights to specifically what we're trying to accomplish, as opposed to an academic discussion, which may not be actionable for us. But I follow you. Thanks.
I'm happy to have the research group take the lead on that.
I am as well.
Anything else before we move on to public comment? Well, there's no one in the chamber. Would anyone on Zoom like to make a comment? Okay. Well, with that, we can move to announcements and future meeting schedule. We kind of covered some dates already, but we should probably recap them here. So we meet on the second Monday of every month. So that puts us at February 14th, Valentine's Day.
That's not ideal.
And on the 10th of February is the Thinking About Race Thursday. And via email, the research group is going to work out a standing meeting time. Anything else?
If I may just mention, and I won't go into detail, we'll talk about it in the next research group meeting. But we had talked about in our research group meeting before the feasibility of developing some sort of diversity and equity and inclusion type index. And I imagine we'll discuss that some more in our meeting. But I can imagine that we might need or want or ask of the borough for information, data-driven kind of information, which they may have. My ignorance on this is I don't know what sort of information the borough retains, how much they're allowed to share. We did talk about this before, but if we're going to be developing guidance for borough officials about next steps, that's one of our deliverables. I think we're going to need some data on what does the borough, what type of information relative to this subject of diversity and inclusion and the like is maintained by the borough, and is any of it curated? are we talking about we're going to have to do this from whole cloth, or is there a data available? So that's just something on my mind. I'm just throwing it out there since we're all here, but we could talk about it in our research group in the next meeting.
Noted. We'll talk about it when we schedule a meeting. Thank you. Anything else for the good of the order?
I don't believe so. I did share some information about the MLK Commemoration Committee and what all they have planned this coming weekend. I'm sure there'll be plenty of events all over the community. So if you guys have information to share, certainly share information. And yeah.
Okay.
That's all I got.
With that, I declare this meeting of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission adjourned.